today we're in the centre of Aldbourne, and we're here to take a look at the place where Easy Company was based during their time in England. This is Aldbourne as depicted in Band of Brothers. Now, the village of Aldbourne features fairly heavily in episode 1 of Band of Brothers. Of course, they start off in the States at Toccoa in Georgia, and then they come over here to England. Now, they actually spent a long time in Aldbourne. Of course, in the series, they only depict a little bit being here. But in reality, they were here for best part of 9 months. They arrived here in September 1943 and stayed here in Aldbourne right up to just before D-Day, when they moved down to our pottery to get the planes across for the landings behind Utah Beach. That meant that Aldbourne was a huge part of their lives. They spent a long time here. They formed friendships here. They did training here. They practiced their skills. They met women here. Some of them started relationships and even got married here in Aldbourne. Aldbourne was a huge part of the lives for the men of Easy Company. Today we're going to take a look around and explore. We're going to go show some of the places which were depicted in Band of Brothers and a few other spots as well. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to exploring Aldbourne with you. Right, the first place we're going to go is just on the other side of the village. So the first place in Aldbourne that I've come to is just here. We're at the top of the village at St Michael's Church. And the reason I came here first is because this is an area that is heavily related to Dick Winters, obviously a key member of the Band of Brothers TV series and a key person in Easy Company. Well, in his early time in Aldbourne, he visited St Michael's Church here, and whilst taking a walk in the grounds where I'm stood now, he ran into the Barnes family, Francis and Louis May Barnes. He got talking to them, and they were going to go on to play a key role in his time here in Aldbourne. So whilst walking the grounds of the church here, Dick Winters ran into the Barnes family and he got talking to them, and it turned out they were here visiting the grave of their son who had been killed with the RAF in the earlier part of the war. He got talking to them and they invited him to stay with them just down in the village. It was a little bit of a better environment to be in a personal home than in some of the billets that he'd been given, so he accepted. And we're going to head down there to take a look at where that was in just 1 second. Before we do, I've just got one quick place I want to take a look at whilst we're here in the church grounds. So just in the church grounds here, we have the grave of Corporal L.J. Barnes, Leonard Barnes. This is the son of Francis and Louis May Barnes, who they were visiting here in the graveyard. He was a member of the Royal Air Force. He was killed on the 12th of June 1942. He was just 26 years old. You can imagine having lost a son of that kind of age and then meeting somebody like Dick Winters, a military man. They probably were reminded of their son, so it's understandable why they might have invited him to stay with them just down in the village. Let's go take a look at that now. Now, before we head down into the village to take a look at that spot, just should touch on the church. You can imagine the church here played a key role for a lot of the men of Easy Company who were based here in Aldbourne. They would have, a lot of the men there would have had faith. They would have wanted to visit somewhere like the church, and in fact it became part of their lives. In fact, Ronald Spears, another key person we know in Easy Company from the Band of Brothers series, he got married here to a lady. He's actually not a local lady from Aldbourne. He met her whilst in Winchester, but they got married just here at St Michael's Church, and there is actually a photograph of the wedding party outside the church, which I'll share into the video now. Right, let's go take a look a bit further into the centre of the village. Okay, so we've just moved down into the centre of the village of Aldbourne. There's a few places that we're going to be looking at just here. We're literally 5 minutes walk from the church, but the place we want to see first is this building right here behind me. So this building here, the village store, is where the Barnes family invited Dick Winters to stay with them. And in fact, he ended up sharing a room with Harry Welsh, who we also know from the series Band of Brothers. And they shared a room just here. This window upstairs here is where Dick Winters and Harry Welsh spent their time whilst they were billeted here in the centre of Aldbourne. Right here in the centre, just near a couple of other sites that we want to have a look at whilst we're here. Now, just slightly further down the road, the building where Dick Winters and Harry Welsh were is just up here. We've just come down to the old manor house. Now, I've actually seen this described incorrectly on YouTube a little bit, because the old manor house here I've seen described before as the 506th headquarters, where Colonel Sink had his office. No, actually that's not correct. The 506th headquarters were in Littlecote House, where we're going to go to in a little while, and that's where Sink's office was based. The old manor house, though, was still involved during the war here in Aldbourne. So the old manor here, as I said, it was used, but it wasn't the headquarters for Colonel Sink. The old manor here was used as some headquarters. Unfortunately, it's private property, so we can't get in there to take a look. But this was used as the headquarters of Strayer. So Strayer was based just here. That scene in Band of Brothers where Strayer's telling off Sobel for cutting the fence and letting the cows out, well, that was based at Strayer's headquarters, which was depicting this place just here. This is the old manor in Aldbourne. Right, from here, we need to go across the road to a place that would have been very important for a lot of the men based here in the village. So during Easy Company's time here in Aldbourne, I believe there were actually 5 pubs. The pubs would have been very important to those guys. A bit of socialising time, a bit of downtime, and of course time to drink some beers. Well, there's 2 pubs in particular we're going to look at today. One of which is the Blue Boar, which was reserved for the officers, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. But first of all, we're going to look at a pub just here in the centre of the village. This is a pub called the Crown, and this is where a lot of the men would have come and been drinking during their time here in Aldbourne. Let's go take a look. Okay, so here in the centre of the village we have got the Crown pub. One of the first things you see when you approach the pub is they've actually got a plaque on the wall here to commemorate what happened here. It's a blue plaque that talks about the fact that this was the headquarters and communication centre of Easy Company, 101st Airborne, the 506th Infantry Division, USA, known as Band of Brothers, billeted in Aldbourne prior to the D-Day landings of 1944. So as well as being a pub, this was used as the headquarters and communication centre. I believe that was actually in the basement of the pub. Now the pub here has embraced the history of what happened here, and inside they've actually got a few bits which we're going to go in and take a look at. I also love the fact they haven't been afraid to do their own thing. And outside the pub over here we have got a classic World War II, no I'm joking, a Dalek. I think that's great, outside the Crown pub here in Aldbourne. Right, let's see if we can get inside and take a look. Okay, so just stepped out of the Crown. There were lots of people having lunch and stuff in there, so it wasn't really appropriate to film inside. But I took a look around. They've got some cool, like, historic photos and stuff, and a few little bits in there. They've got some memorabilia from the guys who were here, and I've took a few photos and little clips which you'll be seeing on the video right now. And most importantly, I bought a beer and I toasted the men of Easy Company. Of course, the ones who are here and the ones who are famous from the series, but also the ones whose names we don't know from Band of Brothers, and quite often the men who would have been billeted here in Aldbourne, gone out to France on D-Day, and never came back. So it's important to remember those guys too. So I've toasted a beer to those guys. Right, now we're just going to head up the road to one other pub which I was talking about earlier. So we've just walked up from the Crown, which was just down there behind us, and we're coming back up towards the back of the village again, so you can see the church where we started off filming earlier. Well, across from me here is another pub. This is the Blue Boar pub. Now, the difference between the Blue Boar and the Crown is that the Blue Boar was reserved for the officers. They had banned the enlisted men from coming into this pub so they could have it to themselves. So this is the Blue Boar pub. Let's take a bit of a closer look. So here's the Blue Boar pub. You can see why they chose this one, the officers. A bit more picturesque, right by the green. Lovely view of the church, as opposed to the Crown, which is down kind of on the square in the centre of the village. This is the Blue Boar pub, where the officers would drink, just here on the green. Lovely. Right, we've got one other place that we need to check out before we finish here in Aldbourne. So we took a look at the house, or the apartment I should say, or the room even, where Dick Winters was billeted. But of course a lot of the men didn't have the luxury of being inside a home, a family home. A lot of them were just in the old Nissan and Nisan huts. People say that some different ways. And we're going to go check a look at where a lot of the men were billeted in those huts just here at Aldbourne. Let's go have a look. So we've just come down literally 2-3 minutes drive outside of the centre of the village to what is now the recreation ground, and in fact that there is a football pitch set up right here. Soccer to my American friends who say it wrong. Football pitch here at Aldbourne. Now this field at the time is where a lot of the men of Easy Company were billeted. So here is where you would have had rows of the Nissan or Nisan huts, depending how you want to say it. Now, we're going to have a bit of a look around now, but far more involved than I'll be able to do in this video. There was a video made here very recently, in the last couple of years or so, by Time Team, who did some actual kind of excavations of the land here. I really recommend checking out that video, and in fact I'll link it in the description, because they came down here, did a load of kind of work on the ground and some digging and metal detecting and surveying, and they found some really interesting bits. So well worth checking out that video. I'm going to link it in the description below. Now when you come here, they actually have a plaque just by the edge of the recreation ground. I didn't know this was here, I've got to confess, but it says, "In memory of those service personnel stationed in Aldbourne during the Second World War, who sacrificed their lives for our freedom, we will remember them." And we're only a week after Remembrance Day, so still a couple of poppy wreaths down here, just next to the recreation ground here at Aldbourne. We've just come through to the kind of the next sort of field, so the recreation ground is this one behind us. I believe in the Time Team video they did some work on this field as well, but nonetheless, although there's nothing here to see today, it's fascinating coming to this area to see the place that so many of these men of Easy Company, who we're familiar with through Band of Brothers, called home. And remember, they were here for 9 months initially, but of course also remember they came back here as well. After an initial period of time in France, they were brought back to England and again back to Aldbourne. And we see that in the series in Band of Brothers, where Malarkey riding the motorcycle down, and that's into Aldbourne. So they came back here for a while before then moving out from here to Holland, where they dropped in as part of Operation Market Garden, and moved on from there through the rest of the war. So Aldbourne was a huge part of their homes, and a really interesting place to come to. And I'm stood by the path that links one field to the next field and then goes on into the centre of the village of Aldbourne. So we are quite literally here walking in the footsteps of the men of Easy Company, who would have walked through here every day on their way down to the Crown pub to get a drink after they'd done their training and their drills and everything else, some of which would have been done here in these fields. Okay, so we've just finished up here at the recreation ground, but we're not done just yet. When we were down in the centre of Aldbourne, we talked about the fact that the old manor was often confused as being Colonel Sink's headquarters. Well, we've got one other place to go, just so we can make sure we get that piece correct. Okay, so when we were in Aldbourne, we talked about the fact that the old manor sometimes was mistaken as the headquarters of Colonel Sink. That was used as a headquarters and Strayer was based there, but we've come up the road a little bit now to a place called Littlecote House, and that is this place just here, a much bigger, much more impressive building than the old manor. Now this is the place that was used as the headquarters for the 506. This is where Colonel Sink's office was based. Now if you think back to the Band of Brothers series, the meeting with Sobel where he told him he was being removed from Easy Company, where the NCOs all turned up and put in their resignation from their roles, that was depicting this place here. We're probably about 10-15 minutes drive from Aldbourne where we're based, and in fact you might remember in that episode of Band of Brothers, Sink talks to Sobel about the fact he's going to go and head up a jump school at Chiltern Foley. Well, we actually drove through Chiltern Foley to get here, and we're now just around the corner from Chiltern Foley, and Aldbourne is the other side of that. So very close to Aldbourne, but not actually in Aldbourne. Now they still have Colonel Sink's office here at Littlecote House, and we're going to go inside and see if we can get a look at that. I don't know if we can, but we're certainly going to try. Let's go have a look. Wow, so when I said that this was a slightly larger and more grand building than the old manor in Aldbourne, yeah, it turns out I was absolutely right. This building is huge. Now, since getting here and finding out a bit of stuff, I've slightly misunderstood what they've got. They don't have Sink's office set up kind of like a museum, but it's still there. He used the room, which was the library, and in fact still is set up as the library now, as his office. So we're going to go inside and check it out right now. So this room was literally still being used as a library with people sat in there quietly reading, so there was no chance for me to film inside without being very disrespectful. But look, this is the library at Littlecote House. This is the room that Colonel Sink used as his office. You can see why. It's a grand room. It's big, it's spacious. They have some information on the wall, just this plaque, simple plaque, just explaining that the 101st Airborne Division used the house during the World War II. But it's a beautiful room, and you can absolutely understand why Colonel Sink would have chosen to have this room as his grand office. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that little look at Littlecote House, the building that was used as the headquarters for Colonel Sink. I hope you enjoyed this whole video taking a look at some of the places related to Easy Company and Band of Brothers around Aldbourne. I certainly did. As a fan of Band of Brothers and a fan of the history, walking in the footsteps of some of these guys and seeing some of the places that were depicted in the TV series was fascinating for me. Now it's worth just noting that the Band of Brothers episode 1 featuring Aldbourne wasn't filmed in Aldbourne and wasn't filmed in that area at all. In fact, it was filmed in another little village, but I'm not going to say anything more about that other than if you stick around for the next video on this channel, you might get to find out some more. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, do me a favour and do all the YouTube stuff right here on the screen. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do that. My Patreon link is in the description. You can buy me a coffee, and if you can't do those things, that's totally fine. Just liking, commenting and share this video with somebody else. That helps me out a load too. In the meantime guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to see you on the next video.